there's a lot of leaders in the room, great RVPs that have come out of this particular marketplace, regional directors, team coordinators. I know a lot of you, I see a lot of your faces here today. So it's great. I'd like to talk about all of you, but I don't have time, so I'm going to talk about myself for a minute. Is that okay? I really appreciate talking about me because I'm my favorite topic, and then it's much easier on myself. But as Chanelle mentioned, I have been with ACN. This is my 25th year with the company. Wow. I've earned the safari trip. 25 years in the business, and I got started at the very, very beginning as the company was kind of getting off the ground. My background, actually, I'm an engineer by trade. High school, college. I spent about 10 years in the engineering world. I got a little frustrated at work, started to look around, wanted to make more money. Anybody here ever been frustrated at work before? Anybody here want to make more money? Yeah. You don't raise your hand, you're lying. No, I don't want to. I hope I'm broke when I grow up, right? I think we all want to figure out how the money game works, how to make more money, how do we get control. And I know we talk about freedom and lifestyle and all those different things that come along with it, but at some point in your life you just have to say, you know what, enough's enough, I got to figure something else out. And after working for so long and having gone to school and figured out what I thought I'd figured out, I just got frustrated in that particular arena. It's not like I'm against work or against having a job or anything like that. I just wanted to make more money. You know, it seemed like after I got my first job, I found myself broker than when I had no job. And I don't know how that happened. I started spending more money than I ever had. When I was broke, I just never spent any money because I didn't have any, right? So things started to change, and I started to look around. I said, I need to make more money. I called my father. I said, Dad, I need to make more money. He said, you need to get another job. I said, okay, I'm going to get another job. I'm going to quit this job. I'll find something else. He said, no, I didn't say quit anything. I said, get another job. And, he had no real way to wealth. His way to wealth or making more money was you work harder, you work more hours. And he goes, if you can't work more hours where you're at, then you go figure something else out where you can work more hours. So I actually went out and got a second job. I started to bartend at night. So as a bartender, I was working 35 hours a week. My day job was 55 hours a week. So now I found myself spending about 90 hours a week at work. And I was working 7 days a week, and it was just round the clock. And I started to kind of figure out, I said, you know what, I know how to make money. I'm not afraid to work. I don't think most people are afraid to work hard or work a lot of hours, but they want to figure out, how do you get on the other side of money? How do you start figuring out, and then I started realizing after a couple of years of bartending, I would go in at, 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and I'd get out around 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. At 2 or 3, at 6 o'clock at night, the guy that owned the bar would be there. He'd open the door, he'd let me in, put in the kill, and he'd leave. 9 hours later, he'd come back, I'd close the door, he'd lock it up, he'd stand there, I'd give him all the cash, and he'd walk home and go to bed. I go, I want that job, right? And where he was never in there, he never figured it out, and I figured, I really don't know what he's doing, but it seems like, you gotta have a business in this world. So I started looking around, I go, what do I need to do myself? And I said, I need to have a business. And I go, that's it. That's the problem, is I'm working for everybody else. I should go out and figure out the game. And I said, that's it. I need to have a business. All the books I read, have a business, own a business, run a business. So I went out and I got two of my brothers together. I go, I figured it out for us. I go, the reason that we're broke is we don't know what we're doing. We're working for someone else. We need to have a business. Let's figure it out. They go, yeah. They go, yeah, let's get a business. Let's get a business. I go, yeah, we're going to get a business. They go, great. What should we do? They go, what are we good at? Nothing. We're not good at anything, right? I go, we don't know anything. We don't know what to do. I said, but I'm a bartender. We're Irish. We drink. Let's get a bar, right? So we got a bar. Unfortunately, our friends are also Irish. They also drink, and they also had no money, and they drank for free at our bar, and we closed it down. So what I did realize is having a business is part of the equation or part of the dream or part of what you think works, but but knowing how to run a business, operate a business, manage a business, go through the regulations that are accustomed with the business. And I applaud every person who's in business. If you're in business here today and you have a small business, a large business, whatever it may be, you have no idea what it takes to get a business up and running. The fact is, that's what scares most people is we don't know what we're doing. Then you actually get a business, and most people go out of business because they don't know how to run the business like us. I had no idea. I didn't know about regulations, about this, that, the other. We didn't hire a lawyer. We kind of all signed our names to a whole bunch of different leases. We got things up and running. All of a sudden, we were all liable for all these different things. And I go, you know what? Did you check this? My brother would be like, no. Did you check this? No. Did you do this? No. Did you do this? No. Did you have a lawyer look at this? Lawyer. Right? That was like $500 for a lawyer. Right? I go, well, it's cost us $25,000 to find out we should have got a lawyer for $500, right? But the thing is, you just don't understand how all that works. So then after that, I said, you know what? That still seems to be the key, and that's really probably 30 years ago I ran across, about 30 years ago now, I guess I ran across this industry of network marketing. Now, I had no idea what this business was all about. I walked into a room just like everybody else did here this morning. Now, it wasn't with ACN, it was with another company, but how many of you guys came in here today and you were like, sometimes if you're kind of new, you're a little overwhelmed, you walk in here, everybody's happy, and they're coming at you, and the music's playing, and everyone's clapping. I'm like, I got a call from my younger sister, she said, come to a meeting. I go, what's the meeting about? She said, I can't tell you. I go, I'm not coming to a meeting about a meeting. I'm working 90 hours a week right now. Like, what's the meeting about? The last thing I need is another meeting. She said, I can't tell you, just come to the meeting. And I go, where's the meeting at? She said, we're at a hotel in a room. And I go, she was like 20 years old. I go, in a hotel in a room with who? She goes, all these people. I go, what people? What are you talking about? I go, wait a minute, I'm not asking any more questions. I'm calling Dad. Right? And I did. I called my dad. And I said, listen, Dad, Cass has been calling me at work, calling me at home. She's calling me all the time. She's leaving me all these messages. She wants me to come to some meeting. She's trapped in some hotel. I think she's in I think they got her in a cult or something. I go, well, she's calling me day and night. And I said, you got to get down there. I said, my father goes, you know what? She's been calling your mother and I too. Your mother and I are going down there tonight. I said, oh, good. Get down there tonight, see what she's doing. I go, get her out of there. She was a great waitress. We'll put her back to work tomorrow. And my father went down to the room. I went down to the hotel, went down to the meeting that night. I called him the next morning. I go, Dad, did you get her out? He goes, no, we're in it. You need to go to a meeting. So, a week later, I was walking into a room just like this, 30 years ago with another company. I walk in the room, my mom is standing on a chair in the back singing, I want money, lots and lots of money, I want to be rich. And she's dancing, and the music's playing that was on when I came up here. My dad was holding her up. I walk in, I go, get off the chair, you got a bad knee, your hips out, what are these people doing? She's like, I'm going to be rich, this is it, I found it. So I sat in the back and I go, oh my God. I looked at her, my sister saw me walk in the doors, all these people were happy, they're running around with flags, the music was playing. I go, what kind of meeting is this, right? And my sister saw me and she came walking towards me and it looked like half the meeting people were coming with her. They were all walking towards me and they were behind her in a circle, right? She goes, this is my brother Mike. They go, Mike, we've been waiting for you. No, I'm not shaking hands, I don't want anything to drink, no juice, coffee, none of us want anything over here. We're going to sit, we're going to listen, and we're going to get out, right? And, but you know what, I sat down, one thing I wanted to know, I guess when I got there the first time was, why are people so excited? Why are people so happy? Nobody where I worked, and I guess why I felt like that is because where I worked, nobody was happy, nobody was excited, nobody cared if I was there, nobody cared if I wasn't there, it's just like one of those things, you walk into work, how many of you guys know it? You get up in the morning, you go to work on Monday morning, right? And you look around, you go, what am I doing here? They're looking back going, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? And you got to go through it, and you just kind of go through that realm every single week. And I finally thought, you know what? These people actually want to be here. So why are they happy? Why is my mom dancing on a chair? What is my sister excited about? Let me sit in a chair and find out. And just basically all the information you heard this morning, a lot of stuff that Chanelle covered, is about our industry, how our industry works. It's really not complicated. We take our product or service from point A and we get it over to point B. Right? We find an end user, an end consumer, whatever that is. And whatever that product or service is, in our industry it's a service, and we just connect those two dots. Whatever that money that's made in the middle is the money that gets to get put in our pockets. Is that fair? So as the gentleman got in front of the room back then, he explained how the business worked. I kind of got excited because he talked about things that were outside of the business world and outside of having a job and outside of things and stuff I was looking for. But he started to share about the opportunity to have a business and to own an asset and to have to have something you have ownership of versus paying for things that you have ownership of. And he said, this is how money works. This is how a business works. This is how most people go through life. And he shared with me a couple of things. Number one, he said, remember this. He said, whether you get involved with our business or not, and the same thing happened. The same stats are true today. He said 97% of our country fails financially by the age of 65. He said, what I mean by that is that 97% of our country is dependent upon friends, family, and the federal government to sustain a living by the time they reach retirement age. He said only 3% of the population have actually figured out the money game. He said 3% of the population actually employ the other 97% of the country. He said, now, we're not trying to change those stats, but does it make sense to find out what the 3% know that you don't know? And he said, most of us are doing what everybody else is doing, and we're all going to be successful. Unfortunately, very few are successful because they're doing what everybody isn't doing, and they figured out the money game. The other thing he said people are confused. He said they're confused about what an asset is and what a liability is and how to think like a business owner and what does that mean. And normally we're thinking about how, if I work more hours, it's the same way I was talking about earlier. If I work 30 hours, I get paid this. If I work 40 hours, I get paid this. If they're not going to pay me more, I get another job. I work 20 hours there and 30 hours here. He said, understand the difference between what an asset is. He said, most people don't understand an asset. He said, there's two things in our lives that have value. They're called assets and liabilities. He said, assets are something, the definition of an asset is something you have ownership of that makes you money. Something you have ownership of that makes you money. He said, the definition of a liability is something you have ownership of that costs you money. Right? He said, so think about it. He goes, think about it in this room and think about it. And he was talking back then. He said, so think about the difference. He said, so the average American, the average person, their biggest asset is what? So their house, right? Think about it. Right? So that's your biggest asset, right? How much money does your house make you? How much money does your house cost you? Oh, your biggest asset is now your biggest liability. Okay, so let's go back to your assets. Now what's your next biggest asset? Car. How much money does your car make you? Nothing. Oh, your car is another liability. Let's go back to your other asset. What's your next asset?
Portfolio.
Your portfolio. How many people have one? 2. Okay. See, most people don't have an asset. Right? Then they go down to my asset's my job. Right? Well, do you own your job? No. So it's not yours. It's not an asset. Most people have no assets. They have all liabilities. I have a boat. I have a car. I have a house. I have this. I have that. I have this and that. What's all that cost you to keep? So the idea of wealth isn't how many things you have, because that just means you're paying for stuff. The idea is how many things do you have that pay for those things? And so understanding the difference, I was suddenly sitting there going, wow, my house. It's like how everything was a liability. And he said, explain that what this industry is this is an industry where you have an opportunity to build an asset. He goes, now what that asset may not produce anything because you get started, if you started today or last month or last week, whatever it may be, but it was $499 to start up your business. Does that make sense? Now it's your job over the next couple of years to stop buying liabilities and start feeding the asset, right? Then you get into a position like the RVPs, like you heard from Chanelle Burt and Aaron Burt that are, predominantly in this area. And their asset now is their business of ACN. And what does that pay for? The Lamborghini, the house, the kids, right? And the lifestyle, right? Because it gives them the opportunity to go out and do it because the asset is now working for them. So we're going to talk today really about building your asset. Is that fair? All right. So that was all. When that changed my point of view as I sat here for the very first time many years ago and listened to that gentleman explain the business, and once again it wasn't with ACN, but when it was all done, I still wasn't convinced. I'm thinking, well, I do want to have an asset. I don't know if I want to do this industry or network marketing because I don't know anything about it. So I felt comfortable going up to him at the end, and I said, well, because I'm thinking, well, first of all, I was confused. I don't know if anybody ever looked at this the first time and you go, I have no idea what they're talking about, right? But they're excited. So I sat in the back and I go, well, you know what? I can either go up and be stupid and say, or I can appear really smart. Well, I understand everything, but this is just not for me. So I put my ego up and I said, I'm gonna do that. And I walked up to him at the end of the presentation, and this guy was making millions of dollars in the industry, and this is 30 years ago. And I went up to him at the end of the presentation, and I said, this is great. He goes, did you see an opportunity for yourself? And I go, I see the opportunity. I go, it's just not for me. I go, I don't really think I like this type of thing. He goes, that's fine. He goes, liking it is not a prerequisite to doing it. And I go, what do you mean by that? So what do you do now? I go, I'm an engineer. I go, he goes, how long have you been doing it? I go, about 10 years. He goes, do you like it? I go, no. He goes, you're a perfect example. Liking it is not a prerequisite to doing it. He said, you know what, you're doing something for 10 years. Will you be happier for 10 years from now if you keep doing what you're doing? I go, probably not. He said, so even if you don't think you like this, he said, I'll promise you this one thing. He said, study it, look into the business, come to our trainings, figure out how our business works, and give it 30 days. At the end of 30 days, I'll tell you one thing, if you give it 30 days, and if you study it, if you read up on it, if you listen to stuff, and you listen to the people you're working with, listen to what we had to train you, at the end of 30 days, not only will you like it, you will love it. So I did. I thought, what do I have to lose? going to have my big ego and my small bank account. He said, that's another problem. He said, people have this giant ego and this little tiny bank account. He goes, what if you could put your ego down here and I could raise your bank account? Right? So I did that. I took my ego, I dropped it down here. I listened to him for 30 days. My bank account started to go up because I started to pay attention to people that were making money versus me trying to tell myself how to make money, which I didn't know how to do already. All right? So you'll learn all those aspects today about how our business works and functions as well. But once again, that's what kind of got me in the role of figuring this thing out. After 30 days, I fell in love with the industry and the business, the people I was working with. I was one of the people dancing on the chairs. I've been following that music around for 30 years, trying to figure out who wrote it. But you know, I rose to the top of 2 other companies before ACN, but both those companies ended up either going out of business or going out of the country and kind of left me stranded here by myself. And I'm going, you know what, I went out and built a couple of strong businesses, went to the top, and the whole business has evaporated below me. So I said, you know what, I like the industry, I like the business, I'm kind of good at it, I guess. I figured it out, but I don't know how the companies work. So that was when I said, you know, I told my wife back then, I said, you know what, and I said, you know, I do like it, but it's not permanent. So I don't want to build something for a year, have it fall apart, and start all over again and over again. I said, I'm going to get out of it, I'll do something else. So I said, she said, great, that's it, we'll never do it again. I go, I'm done, I'm never doing network marketing again. 2 weeks later, I got a call about ACN, and here I am, still talking about not doing it again, but I am here, But I got a call about ACN from the owners of the company. Actually, there's 4 owners, 4 co-founders of the company. Mike Kupas, Tony Kupas, are twin brothers. They had called me. I'd known them beforehand. I had been great friends with them for a couple of years. So they're my best friends, and they called me up and said, listen, we're putting a company together. And actually, they're still twin brothers today. How nice is that? They're still together. And the other 2 gentlemen are Greg Provenzano and Robert Stefanowski. Mike and Tony called me up. Tony called me up talking to me about ACN, talking to me about a lot of stuff we heard about this morning, talking about residual income. Instead of working with a product, they were one of the first companies to incorporate a service into the industry. They said instead of getting paid one time when somebody buys a product, we're going to sell them a service and we'll get paid over the length of the time that person stays on that service. It started with just the long distance back then, which was a small portion of the telecom industry. It's actually kind of almost evaporated, if not completely gone today. But that was the beginning of ACN. And he said, we're going to pay month after month, year after year, as long as the person stays on the service. And he said, here's how we're going to build it, this is what's going to be. And he just explained it over the phone. Now, the company got started up in Detroit, Michigan, and as I mentioned, I'm from the Philadelphia, New Jersey area. So when he called me, he started to talk about the company and the business, and I said, listen, Tony, I just told my wife I would never do this thing again. You know, what is it you want me to do? He said, well, I just want you to take a look at it. He goes, I want you to meet the other guys and that we're putting the company together with. You have some background, some understanding of the industry. We want to bring you in. We want to make you, show you how, you know, to be one of the first people that we're getting started with. Now, first of all, they were 26 years old when they started the company. So it wasn't like I was looking up to them and going, oh my God, they're opening a business. I was like, oh my God, they're opening up a business, right? And then he talked about the other guys who I didn't know, was Greg and Robert. But at the end of the conversation, I said, Tony, what do you want me to do? He said, well, listen, I just want you to come to a meeting. I go, oh my God, not the meeting thing again, right? So I said, well, where and when? He said, well, this Friday. And it was Tuesday when we were talking. I said, well, where's the meeting? I said, I'll sneak out, I'll come to the meeting. I'll meet up with you. I said, where's the meeting at? He said, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan on Friday. So if I leave work, I drive. I go, dude, if I tell my wife I'm running out for milk on Friday and I end up in Detroit, she's gonna know I'm with you, right? And I remember my wife was listening on the other line, in the other room when I was talking to her. She's like, hang up, we're not doing anything. She's yelling at me right now, right? And so I hung up the phone. She goes, did you tell him no? I go, no, I'm gonna fly up there Friday. I'll tell him no in person. And so that's what I did. I bought an airline ticket the next day, and 2 days later I jumped on a plane and I flew up to Michigan. My thinking was I'd rather spend some money on an airplane ticket, spend a weekend up here, find out what they're talking about, rather than try and get the information over the phone, join, and kind of go down the wrong road again. And I thought, you know what, worst that could happen, I spent a weekend with my friends. The best that could happen, I can figure out how this thing, whole thing works and what it's all about, you know. So I spent the weekend up there with them and kind of learned how the business worked. They talked about the industry, talked about the business, talked about what they were doing. Mike and Tony, today Mike and Tony are master marketers, master trainers. They always have been. That's been their coup de grace on everything that they do within ACN. Tony handles everything here in the US marketplaces, Canada, actually all of North America. He's down in Mexico right now We opened up Mexico last year. So he handles this side of the country and this side of the world for the most part. His twin brother handles all the countries that we're in Europe. As a lot of you know, we're in 25 countries right now. Handles the entire European continent of Europe. It also handles everything that we're doing over in Australia and New Zealand and that whole marketplace as well. And then he also helps navigate what we're doing now with our Asian expansion. We opened up South Korea and we just launched Japan recently. And a lot of you don't know, but yesterday we launched Zoom Energy in Japan. The other two gentlemen that run the company, I spent the weekend, that weekend with them. Mike and Tony took me for a tour of the home office. The home office up in Detroit was about 1,200 square feet back then. It was a little tiny office suite on the 3rd floor of some rundown office building. I walk in, the elevators weren't working. We walked up the steps, we walked down the hall. He said, I'll give you a tour of the world headquarters. I was standing out in the hallway, he opened up the 2 doors into the suite. He goes, you can see it all from here, here's the tour. And we stood out in the hallway, and we saw the entire facility. And it was actually half the size of this room, and that's how ACN had gotten started. Walked in, they had one little tiny office in the back, all 4 co-founders at the time. They shared it, they alternated days that they actually used the office. He showed me the office, it had Tony Koopa's written on it, and he goes, I got an office. I go, oh, you got an office, very cool. We went in, we sat down, we talked. He said, let's go out, I want you to meet the other guys. So I went out that night and met with Robert Stevanowski, and Robert started to talk about the business and the industry. Robert is the, basically he's the chief operating officer of the company for the most part. I mean, he knows how the business works. He actually put the business together. He was only 30 years old when he put this whole industry together. But he's got a foresight, into seeing where we should go, the vision of what the company could do, what we should be, and what we should be involved with, what services we should work with. And I remember when I met him that time, he said, Mike, I appreciate you being up here. He said, let me tell you something about ACN. He said, we appreciate making the run up here. He said, but we'll make more money in the future off stuff that doesn't even exist today. And that's our business plan. I have no idea what you're talking about. Because first of all, I wanted to know what they were talking about. And he said, well, look at it like this. He said, right now we're working in the communications. We got access to the long distance market. He said, one thing we do know, people will always want to communicate, right? He said, it doesn't matter how they communicate. He said, but whatever that way is, we're going to market whatever it will be. Whatever the consumer wants, we're going to find somebody who's going to create that next line of communication. We're going to connect those dots. I go, well, phones already exist, Robert. Like, what else is there? He said, well, you're thinking about the phones as they are today and the way that they have been, but the next generation is going to be different. He said, you know what, people are communicating differently, there's stuff. Now the internet wasn't even known as the internet back then, it was called the super information highway. It was like layman's terms for we don't know what this is, right? He said, but data is now going that way and it's part of the communication process. He said, the other thing that's out there right now, and he said, sorry, how many people here don't have a cell phone? Look at that. Relax everybody. Does he have shoes? I mean, would you guys be upset? Right? You go, oh my God, you should have saw your neck swing. How does he survive? Would you guys agree that if someone in here didn't have a cell phone, we'd be helping them out right now? Oh, poor thing. Right? How are they going to get home? Their car. How are they going to know where they're going? What are they going to do? How will they ever know how much money they have? Do they have any money? Right? I mean, because we can't survive without our cell phones nowadays. We can't watch TV without our cell phones nowadays. As a matter of fact, we can't watch TV. We just watch our cell phones with the TV on in the background, right? It's become to the point where, you used to charge your phone in one room of the house, started in the kitchen when you were excited about it, then it made its way somehow upstairs to the bathroom, and, now it sleeps with you, right? How many guys sleep this far from your cell phone? Right? And if you're married, when you wake up in the morning, do you turn over to see him or her, or do you check the phone first? I always catch my wife, 6 a.m., I go, what are you doing? Oh, nothing! Well, I know nothing, but nothing, Because nowadays, it's not that secret. It lights up the entire room. It's like, I go, there's nobody on Facebook, hon. It's 4 a.m. Please, there's really nobody there. She's home. I go, oh, what is it? Next time we're both sitting up looking at her phone, right? But you know what? Our information's on there, how do we get around places, you know. And once again, to think that 20 years ago, Robert talked about it, that he's the one that pushed us across the borders, pushed us up into Canada, pushed us around the world. He wanted the company to be bigger, have a larger footprint, to make it more accessible, to give IBOs more services, and give them to allow us to make a bigger impact. So Robert's thinking is still big. Robert's in Japan last week, he's in Korea right now. They're still expanding our footprint, pushing our business forward. It's 2017. And the other gentleman that runs the company is the president of our company, Mr. Greg Provenzano. How many people here have met Greg Provenzano? Now I know there is a presidential inauguration coming to this area next week, right? I wish Greg Provenzano was that president. You know, I can tell you, I always tell Greg, you should have run. Hands down, you would have won, right? You would have gone, go for him, whoever he is, right? He looks sharp, he seems to, but you know why? Because Greg has a moral, ethical compass. He's got a compass that he runs his life on, that he runs his values. He's got Christian values that run through his entire family, that run through his life. And he doesn't push that on anybody, but you can tell that he lives it. Does that make sense? He lives what he breathes, and he said, he's incorporated that into the company. He believes in right and wrong, black and white. You know, that's it. He said, I don't believe in gray. It's either good or it's not good. And it's got to be good for three things, he told me the first time I met him. It's got to be good for the IBOs, the people that sign up, the people that work with us. It's got to be good for the customers. We've got to provide a service that they can use, that they can pay for, that they have, or we can provide. Because it also has to be good for the company, so the company can stay in business, they can pay the IBOs and take care of the customers. So it's good for the independent business owners, good for the customers, and good for the company. We'll look at incorporating into what we're doing. Because if it's only good for one or two of those things, we're not even going to entertain it. That puts it in the gray or the not good area, right? So we run the company like that, which is why we're still in business 25 years later. He also is big on personal growth. You know, most of what the speakers and the trainers that are cultivated through ACN come through the guidance of Greg Provenzano. He's not like a spiritual guy who is standing there, you go, oh, who's Greg? Everybody in this room, if you don't know Greg, a lot of people in this room probably met him or have shaken his hand or been with him, everybody in our company. He guides the people. He said, I'm going to attach personal growth to what our business is about, Mike. He said, personal development should be a part of what somebody embraces in an industry like this. He said, because for us to create a great company, we also have to be able to create a better person. So for us to be the best, we want to have the best people. That doesn't mean the best people, we can have the best people walk in, but they may not know what they're doing, so we're going to make sure that they understand everything about it. It's not going to be just about money. It's not going to be just about this. He said, I want it to be about health and wealth and build and this and take care of yourself and how a person is well-rounded, because the more well-rounded they are, the more structured they'll be and the more dedicated they'll be to what we're building. We'll build a big company like that. So we have a lot of personal development. As a matter of fact, we're world-renowned for our training, 25 years in the business. That's why people are excited about what our business is about. In the entire industry, we're the best training source of network marketing in the world and direct sales right now. So we're recognized at at an international level with everything that we're doing in that respect. But Greg also has a big vision about how the company can grow. And you know, when I met him 25 years ago, we talked about the industry, talked about the business. And he was sitting in that little office that I talked about earlier. And I walked into that office and Tony introduced me to Greg Provenzano, the president of the company. And I had no idea. I'd never met Greg before. I only heard about Greg from Tony, 2 or 3 days ahead of that. And as he sat down and started to talk about Greg, I sat down and Greg said, thanks for coming to the office. I sat in the same little office. The night before it said Tony Kupas. Greg had taken Tony's name off of the door and he put his own name in the door. Now it said Greg Provenzano, president. Like, oh, you're same office, right? And I went in and I sat down and Greg sat at the desk and I sat across and he talked about the business. And he talked about the things I just talked about. Then he talked about how big the industry was. He said, this is a $600 billion industry, Mike. It wraps clear around the world. He said, and I didn't know what he was talking about at all, but he started talking about how big the industry was. He was talking about the telecom industry. He said 68 countries are up for grabs right now. 68 countries are in the middle of deregulation. We're positioned for growth on an international level like nothing you've ever seen. He said ACN is this and that. And he started talking about what ACN would be. And he was talking about ACN as if it was what it is today, back then. And as he went off, I looked behind him, and behind him behind this desk in this little office, there was a laminated map of the United States. You ever see those laminated maps? And it was thumbtacked into the wall behind the desk, and he started going off. about how big the industry was and how big the thing was and how big. I looked at Greg and I go, Greg, this is unbelievable. I had no idea how big it was. I didn't know what was going on. I go, but I'm looking behind you and I see the map behind you. And when Greg had moved his head, I saw on the map there was one pin in the map. And it was in Detroit, Michigan. It had a little red tip or a little red flag on it. It was just in the map. And I go, 68 countries, Greg, this is unbelievable. Tony didn't tell me I wanted to meet with you, this is unbelievable. I go, you just moved your head, I see the map, I see the pin in the map in Detroit, Michigan. He turns around, he saw the pin, and they had one pin in where the world headquarters was. He goes, Detroit, Michigan, world headquarters. I go, this is unbelievable. I go, where else are you? Where else is ACN? And he said, well, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from the Philadelphia area. He said, when are you leaving? I said, I'm leaving tomorrow. He reached down, he opened up another drawer, he pulled out another little pin, he turned around, he goes, tomorrow? Boom, we'll be in Philadelphia. That was the beginning of international expansion. I remember going home, I had an ACN hat on sideways, a giant t-shirt on ACN. My wife's going, did you sign up? I go, I don't know, I think so. These guys are good. I go, I'm stressed out right now, I'll give you home. She goes, what are you stressed out about? I go, because I am international expansion. But there was something about when he put that pin in the map, and then he put one in Philadelphia, I felt like saying, I'm not in yet. But at that point, I embraced where they were going with the company. And I watched us put pins across the US, a bunch up to Canada, and everything that Greg talked about still is coming true today. Last year, we relaunched Mexico. Last year, we launched ourselves into Japan, one of the biggest countries in the world when it comes to this type of industry. Japan is going through deregulation with energy. There's a requirement in that country that everyone has to choose another provider for their energy. We're the only international company right now that has been licensed to provide energy in Japan outside of what's already happening in Japan. And it's mandatory. Quick areas of where we're at, where we're going, and the steps we are. I'm going to run through a bunch of things. We're on a tour to kind of explain the future of the company. I mean, we've never been better positioned than we are right now. We're in multiple states here. Zoom is also up into Canada. We expanded up there. We're about to expand again into the Toronto marketplace, the Ontario marketplace. We've been on a tour. We just started this past week, and we're working ourselves. Myself, Tony, and Greg are running through the North American marketplace. Greg right now is in Europe. He did the European Circle. He did the North American Circle last week, which Chanelle and Aaron were just re-inducted into the Circle of Champions for 2017. You have a great team here. But on top of that, we've been traveling. Greg is going through Paris and through Madrid and through Germany, as well as he just did Amsterdam with the world headquarters. Myself and Tony and all the circles decided to join us, the 2017 Circle. So I'm not going to go through all these cities, but right now we've got more than 65 cities that are on the tour map for the next 5 weeks. That'll be a part of where we're going to be. So either myself or Tony and Greg are positioned for 35 cities in the next 5 weeks ourselves. So we'll be crisscrossing the U.S., crisscrossing. Tony's down in Mexico right now, be coming back, and we'll be crisscrossing the U.S., crisscrossing the opportunity to actually expand our business, show people what's happening, and really look into the future of ACN as we continue to position ourselves as a worldwide leader. And not only are we at the events there, we talked about Zoom. Last year we were featured with the in Inc. magazine. We were listed as the #1 fastest growing energy provider here in the United States. We were the 13th largest privately held company, fastest growing privately held company in all of North America too. So that's nice to have an outside company evaluate all the companies and all the industries that are happening here in the North American marketplace and feature us. And that Zoom is just one small portion of ACN. Does that make sense? So, once again, we're in 18 states. We're in over 80 different utility markets, including Washington, D.C. would make us 19 marketplaces that we're in here in the U.S. We understand what's happening in the in the energy market. As we know, today's cold. 2 days ago it was warm. The weather is very unpredictable about when people are going to need more energy, what they're going to need. We put people on fixed rates. We have great rates down here right now. Matter of fact, throughout the Maryland marketplace, we have our rates are currently lower than the local utility rates. That's a fixed rate. That means somebody can lock in on a rate with us today that's lower than what they're already paying, and they can lock that rate in. So whether rates go up or up because of energy expansion, our rate will not go up, but it'll flatline out. It'll kind of keep them level. They'll be able to control their costs, and they'll get a great deal in the opportunity to do it as well. We've got great fixed rates with our gas well in a lot of the marketplaces too. You know, BG&E, Delmarva, First Energy, and Pepco doing stuff with both gas and electric. You can get free energy down here. Obviously, you go out and get 10 electric customers and your electricity can be free. You get 10 gas customers and your gas can be free. We expanded up into Canada, into Western Canada, earlier in the mid of 2016. This year, we're launching into the Ontario marketplace, which is going to take us into, say, the Toronto and above the state of New York. So we're starting to expand our international footprint with Zoom Energy. And as I mentioned, we just expanded our Zoom Energy into Japan just over the last couple of days. We also do solar energy in 8 different states. Maryland happens to be one of them. We've got opportunities with Flash Wireless, as I mentioned. We're right across all the 3 largest networks. You'll hear a little bit more about that, what's happening here today. We've got a lot of great activation things happening with our wireless plans throughout here. Global expansion, as I already mentioned. We launched Japan in August. We did our first international event. 4 months later, actually in December, early December, we had our first event. We had about 5,000 people show up for our first international event in Japan after just our first couple months in business. So you can kind of see how big it's going to be over in Japan and what's happening. We evolved and pushed our Flash Mobile. We took our wireless service and crossed borders internationally. We're now offering Flash Mobile throughout the country of Mexico. That is our stepping stone into the Latin American countries altogether. So once we figure out what we're doing, get a good base built up down throughout Mexico. We're doing a 5-city tour actually this week down there. Larry Raskin and Tony Kupas are running through Mexico. We have a strategic partner down there. That footprint that we're on, the network that we're on, will actually not only take us through Mexico, but it'll actually lead us through all the other Latin American countries as well, where their footprint is. So this will be our footprint into Latin America and gives us access to 700 million more people in 21 more countries over the next couple of years. So we're running some bonuses. You'll hear more about this today. The bonuses are We Are ACN bonuses. If you start in January, the way the bonuses work, so you got opportunities to go out and get qualified with 5 points, 3 services. One is required to kind of be outside of yourself. We want to make sure people know how to get customers aside from just using the services and getting on them themselves. You'll learn about more of that today. Qualifications is really, really uncomplicated. Go out and get 15 points yourself, or go out and get 5 points yourself and teach 2 other people to come on board. We always recommend going out and build a business. You're in the networking business. You want to run a business, not just build a residual with, solely, but you can do it however you want. 15 personal customers will get you an executive team trainer. Go out and get 5 customers, 5, 5, and 5. And you actually now leverage yourself on the efforts of other people as well as your own. You go out and start to build a business, and you have other partners that are part of it. You'll be an executive team trainer. If you become an executive team trainer within your first 30 days, and you actually have 20 points total, which means you have 5 and at least each of your teammates have 5, but together all 3 of you have 20 points, or you have 20 points alone, the company will give you a bonus of $500. So a $500 bonus in your first 30 days, how many people agree that's a good bonus? Woo. Right? So you start your business up for $499. Go out and build a business. You have business partners. They're starting to create a residual income, and you've already got a $500 check coming in your pocket. So we'll show you how to do that today, and we'll make it work. The last thing I'll kind of touch on real fast is just the international events that we have. As I mentioned earlier, we're very big on training. Not only will you get trained today and find out more about our business, but more importantly, you're going to learn more about how our whole business operates. We spend a lot of information, a lot of time, and more importantly, we try and focus on the international events. The international events give you a flavor for the entire world of what's happening, but more importantly, it's focused on the marketplace of North America. Greg incorporated, the founders incorporated these trainings back in 1992. One of the things they said to me that first weekend, they said, we will always have training. We'll run at least 4 big trainings per year, and we'll travel around to the local markets as well, where not only can we train and make sure that people are being trained right, but the people can actually be in their own business and come and get the information directly from the source of the people that are creating the whole business. So the international event actually gives you 3 days where basically you can be excited here today. You can love what we're doing. You can get excited when Chanelle spoke this morning. You get excited when the other speakers are up here today. But when it's all said and done, you're going to leave here today and you're going to get back into your own life. Does that make sense? Like you're going to go home. You got to cook dinner. The kids put a bunch of dishes in the sink. Nobody knows how they got there, right? The dog ran away. Nobody knows where the baby's at. All of a sudden, the world starts to fall apart all in 30 seconds, right? You're going to go home and get customers and do this and do that. You start doing it. But that's because you're in your own environment. We'd like to take you out of your environment and out of your comfort zone for a few minutes. And actually, instead of a few minutes, how about a few days? I'll give you 3 days where you're in our environment. 3 days where you're in a learning environment. 3 days where it's about you. 3 days where it's about your business, about your future, and about how to build it, and how to get customers, and how to get trained, and how to get the compensation, and all the different things that work. Well, we spend 3 days with you here, 3 times a year. This is the launch of 2017. This is the most important event that we're going to run of the year. Wave number 1, we recognize for anybody that's been with us, we do some recognition from the people that were our top performers in 2016. You'll get to hear from them. You'll get to hear from the brand new Circle of Champions this year that'll be introduced over the course of the weekend. On top of that, we have a special trainer, Mr. George Zelicki, who joined us in Philadelphia. So I know a lot of people here love George. He's been around the industry since 1971. He's one of the most famous network marketers and sales trainers that's out there. He joined our forces with our company back in the 90s. He's built one of the largest businesses in our business, in the business world, in the networking industry. He does a lot of our business in Europe. Very rarely does he come to North America. We're able to steal him and get him into the Philadelphia, and he's going to come back for our international event in Charlotte in a couple of weeks. I mean, in early March. But also, over the course of those 3 days, you'll hear from the top regional and senior vice presidents in the company of what they just did the last quarter, so to speak, what they did to get there, what they're still doing, so it's the most active people that are in the business for the most part at the top. On top of it, there's the most active people from 2016. They're going to be the Circle of Champions. You'll be able to celebrate the success of this particular organization as well, on multiple levels over the course of the weekend. But this is a weekend, more importantly, if you're new, it's your opportunity to figure out if what we're talking about is right. This is also down in Charlotte, which is the world headquarters. So our new world headquarters moved from Detroit many years ago. We're now situated down in Charlotte. We've got a 17-acre campus down there. It's a beautiful facility. It gives you an opportunity if you want to go in and take a tour of the home office, go see the home office. There's flags for every 50-foot flagpoles out front of the building. There's a half-a-mile driveway now. We're on 17 acres, as I mentioned, from that little tiny office space that we were in many, many years ago to where we're at today with world headquarters all over the world. But the international world headquarters is down in Charlotte. So it'll be a great, great weekend for you to learn and understand. For me, this is the backbone of our business, is to get trained and be trained. That's how I learned the business. Not only did I learn the business, and then I came into ACN. That's how I got my people and built my business within ACN. It wasn't about how good I was. It was about how good they were, and who could I put in front of them. That weekend when I went up there many years ago, and I spent one weekend all by myself, and it was just with the founders and just kind of hanging out. At the end of the weekend, the one thing that I didn't understand was how to build their business. I knew network marketing, but they didn't teach me or train me. They didn't get into all that. They just kind of were painting the vision of what was happening and letting me get a chance to kind of know who they were. At the end of the weekend, I said to Greg, Greg, it was great being here this weekend. I go, the one thing I don't know about getting customers. I don't know much about the service. I really don't know how all the compensation plan work. I said, I kind of know what I need to do, but I don't know. I said, when are you going to do training? And he said, you know what, Mike, that'll be the most important thing that we do. We'll have training. And he said, we're actually going to run one up here in 6 weeks. He said, I said, where? He said, back here in Detroit. He gave me the name of the hotel, and he took out his calendar. I took out mine, and I wrote down the thing. I said, you know what, I'll be back up here in 6 weeks. I'll make sure I come up for the training. He said, well, it'll be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He said, we'll give you 3 days. We'll spend time with you. We'll know everything that you need to know about the business. So I took those 3 days. So I took that 3 days, I put it in my calendar, and I thanked Greg, and I flew home and talked to my wife, and I said, listen, I don't really know a whole lot to explain everything to you. I said, what I do know is that in 6 weeks they're doing a training for a weekend. I'm going to go back up there. I said, so I don't know what's going on here. My wife was pregnant with our first child at the time. She was miserable no matter what. So I said, you're going away, I'm going away. It was 3 days of going up there. So the next day I sat down with her, we were having breakfast and having coffee at the kitchen table, and I said, I'm going to make my arrangements right now while I'm still committed, that I'm going back to Detroit. And I picked up the phone and I called the local bus company. And I called the local bus company and I said, listen, I need to get to Detroit, Michigan from the Philadelphia area, and I need to go Friday and come back on Saturday. And I said, I need 3 buses. And so I booked the 3 buses for that weekend, leave Friday, come back Sunday, and then I hung up the phone. And my wife goes, what are you doing? What'd you do? And I said, well, I made my arrangements. I'm going back to Detroit. I said, for that training, I told you. She said, well, you just got 3 buses. I said, I know. She said, well, who are the buses for? And I said, well, they're for my team. She said, well, who's on your team? I said, nobody. I said, but if I can't fill those buses over the next 6 weeks, I said, I'll never be able to do this business. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, I'm not going to have people give me money and try and figure this thing out and try and depend on me. I'm dependent on them. And And I said, I'm going back to Detroit, but I ain't going alone. And I said, I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks bringing people with me. And that's all I did. I talked about ACN, I got people to sign up. They signed up. I mean, I was working full time, so I was calling people at 6 o'clock, at 7 o'clock in the morning. People answer the phone that early, right? Because it was an emergency. Everything was an emergency. Everything was on high alert. I had 3 buses now I had to fill. It was $55 for each person to get on the bus. It was a round trip. I had no idea who I was going to get on the bus. I started talking to everybody I knew, anybody that they know. I got people excited. I got people convinced they had to go. If you want to be a part of this, you have to go to Michigan. What's it all about? You got to go to Michigan. You got to go to Michigan. You got to get a ticket. You got to get a bus ticket. And I just pushed it. Anybody they knew, anybody that they knew that they knew, anybody that they touched, any cousin, relatives, friends, family. I mean, I pushed and pushed and pushed for the next 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I filled up all 3 buses with 153 people went to Michigan with me for the weekend. But I had 153 people that were nervous. We were going to Detroit, Michigan in 1993, right? And they had never been there. They didn't know why we were going there. They, half of them didn't know who I was, and I barely knew who they were, right? They go, who are you again? I go, I'm the guy on bus 1, Does that bus have a bathroom? I go, no. But 15 hours we were on these buses heading up. And all I could think on the way up, as we were getting closer and people were getting more agitated, I was like, oh my God. I just realized I never saw these guys train. I go, I hope they're good, right? But you know what? They put on a tremendous training. They were so ready to launch the company, so ready for everything that was going. I had 153 people that were nervous on the way up, but on the way back, I had 153 warriors in that buses. I mean, they were ready to, everybody was ready to roll. Everybody's excited as I, from the beginning of the training was like this, to the end of the training, they couldn't wait to get out of there. And you know why? Because now they were armed and ready. Everybody on that bus, I had 153 people that knew how to do a presentation, that knew what the business was all about, to do the vision of the company. They knew how to get customers. They knew how the compensation plan worked. They knew how to go out and get a customer. They knew why to get a customer, why to have a home meeting, how to have a home meeting, how to present a home meeting. They knew everything that I knew. I learned at the same pace as the rest of the people. When we came back, we were all ready. We all knew what we were doing, what I was doing wrong, but now we all knew what we had to do right. And I can share with you that was the turning point of my business. Was people always say, was that the turning point when everyone knew what they were doing? I go, that's probably the turning point when the business really started to make sense to me. But the turning point was when I probably picked up the phone and called the bus company. And I made the commitment to going and not only going and bringing people with me. Because there's a saying in life and in business, the bigger the commitment, the bigger the paycheck. Most people are more interested in, if you give me a bigger paycheck, I'll give you a bigger commitment. But see, that's not how the business world works. You've got to put out first, and you've got to realize what's the outtake down the road and what's going to happen. So we want you to be committed to going to the international, yes, because we know what it will do for you. But we also want you to commit, because once you commit, I can promise you one thing. The one thing you can say like this, go, I'm going. I'm going. But I ain't going alone. I ain't going alone. Well, let me tell you what, you guys are in driving distance to Charlotte. There should be some buses leaving out of this marketplace, and I know some of your leaders are already planning to travel. So make sure you're down there. We're going to launch 2017 with stuff that you have no idea what we're about to touch. This will be the biggest growth year that ACN has had in their 25 years. As we launch into our 25th year of business. We're wrapped around the globe right now, not only with us, ourselves, as to what we're doing, but with what the Circle of Champions and what the leaders in the field are going to be helping us do. So we're excited about it. I'm excited to be down here and share a few minutes with you this morning. I appreciate you guys giving me a little bit extra time. We've got a lot of great training that's going to take place here over the course of the next over the course of the next hour or two, whatever we're going to be covering here. But I want to thank Chanelle, the entire coalition team, for having me out here today. And I'm going to bring up Mrs. Chanelle Burt here to kind of give you some housekeeping on what the next steps are right now. But I look forward to seeing everybody. Good luck, God bless, and I'll see you at the next one.